My name is Jay Harrison. I'm the director of an organization called the MD5 National Security Technology Accelerator. We're part of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, specifically the Undersecretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics. Our mission is to focus earlier in what I would call the innovation value chain. So the speakers in the panel talked a lot about culture. They talked a lot about human capital. They talked about the fact that the authorities that we have kind of already exist, and I would argue that this isn't a statutory authorities problem we're addressing. It's not a policy question we're addressing. It's not a left and right limits question we're addressing. At the end of the day, this whole innovation discussion has mostly to do with changing attitudes, changing mindsets, getting people to accept, internalize risk maybe in a different way. To the extent that the people are really at the heart of the issue, we're focused on providing services and resources to develop the new types of thinkers within the national security context. So I'll give you some examples of the types of things that we do, if that sounds a little too nebulous. We have, for instance, education and training portfolio. In that portfolio, what we're looking at doing is creating an educational context that addresses innovators inside DoD and innovators outside of DoD. So how do you create a shared experiential learning environment where we can bring these communities together and provide a common frame of reference for problem solving? I would really argue that the innovation question in DoD has little to do with transactions, and yet that seems to be where we focus most of our attention. How do we make it easy to facilitate a transition between one party and another? This is a human issue, and it's a human networks issue. How do we bring people together in ways that facilitate creative problem solving to drive new types of solutions? Once the solution has been identified, then the mechanisms need to exist that allow us to go out and get it. So the education piece inside DoD for us looks like working with line managers, middle managers, and senior managers to help enable them to engage in the creative problem solving questions, but also arm them with enough information to where they can push new ways of doing business or new technology solutions up their chain of command. An example of this might look like something called the Adaptive and Agile Leaders Network, which is a program we execute with the University of California, Berkeley. In the case of AALN, we are bringing senior field grade officers who are going through their culminating educational experience in DoD, namely War College, into an unstructured classroom environment. We give them wicked problems to work with, and we put them in the most alien context that we could come up with, which is the University of California, Berkeley, and get them to work with these students coming up with innovative and novel solutions to some of these problems. Now, we're not expecting senior field grade officers who've spent 20 years plus in the military to become wild-eyed innovators and go into their garages and start hacking overnight. What we are expecting is that when they move into their next assignments, they're going to be prepared with a new set of skills, a new set of methodological tools, and a new way of looking at bottom-up innovation so they can become champions of bottom-up innovation in the organizations that they move on to lead. Another example of the educational types of activities that we pursue are we are offering other transaction and innovative contracting types of courses. Had some recent experience with Air Force, I would say middle and junior officer level acquisition professionals to acclimate them to some of the strategies, not legislative strategies, not policy strategies, not authorities. It wasn't going through reams and reams of paper justifying how you do something. It was more human strategies. How do you convince someone in your chain of command who's predisposed to say, just do what we've been doing for the last 20 years, to move in a different direction, to break free I've heard it described as permafrost or frothy layer of mediocrity that you have to break through if you want to push these new ideas forward. A third example is a program, and I have to apologize, DoD seems to have discovered the word hacking all of a sudden. So we too have a program that has hacking in it. It's called Hacking for Defense. In our case, what we're doing is we're working with civilian universities to match challenges from DoD agencies to student-led teams that employ what's called the Lean Launchpad methodology, which is an iterative problem-solving methodology. Over the course of the semester, the student-led teams will explore some type of technology intervention and then refine that intervention based on feedback from the DoD agency. And at the end of the semester, they may end up with a specific solution. We've only offered the class once. It was offered at Stanford University, so we were dealing with some high potential students, but the outcomes were pretty remarkable. We had 2 DoD agencies that ended up funding the prototypes developed at this university student-led course for follow-on implementation. We don't necessarily want to set the bar there, but that is the type of outcome that we see really being important to this conversation. Education, setting the context for collaboration. Collaboration is our next portfolio. In collaboration, we're looking at bringing communities together in constructive problem-solving environments to identify solutions to specific problems. These are things like challenges and hackathons and competitions that engage outside problem solvers in new ways. Again, we're not dealing with businesses in this case. We're dealing with, among other things, who we want to develop lifelong relationships with. We want to expose them to our problems, so whether or not they solve the problem that we're treating in the course of a specific event, hopefully they're going to take away an idea that DoD does interesting stuff, DoD has interesting technology, DoD is an organization that now I understand a little better, and maybe down the road they're going to do something to create value for us. And thirdly, we feel it's very important to provide resources to innovators inside DoD and outside of DoD. You know, it's great to get a Shark Tank event together and to have people come up with their flashes of inspiration and get a pat on the butt and sent back to their organization with a certificate, and that's the end of it. That may be a morale booster, but it doesn't have any practical impact on the way DoD does business. So how do you take these ideas that we see bubbling up from the bottom inside DoD and the bottom out in the startup university world, how do you seed them with enough capital, enough resources, enough infrastructure to where they can go out and actually start doing some experimentation so an agency can come in and make a bigger investment, or a venture capitalist can come in and make a bigger investment? So to that end, we support startups, we support innovators and individuals by giving them access, unique access to DoD infrastructure. How do you bring entrepreneurs into DoD labs to work alongside principal investigators to identify these things that are going to create follow-on value? I'll stop it here. I guess the one aside that I'd like to mention before I give over the mic is that we don't underestimate the power of the bureaucracy to chew up all these things that we're talking about and spit them out. At the end of the day, we have to figure out ways to empower our leaders and our middle managers to fight the hard fights. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been in a situation where you have a decorated combat leader who's come into the field into a staff job, who goes into a conversation with the general counsel and comes out with his tail between his legs and completely unempowered. So how do we provide these folks who are not domain experts in these areas that we're talking about with enough context, enough knowledge, enough backing to push back on that general counsel? Or I'm picking on the attorneys, I apologize, but so I would leave you with that. Thank you.